Hi, my name's Liz Scarf and welcome to my Woolly PhD. This is a weekly vlog about what I'm currently learning and making in my anthropology PhD all about wool. And this week I am between places and don't have my microphone, so I've been testing the sound qualities and I've got to do it through my Bluetooth headphones or else it's poor sound. So please excuse the big chunky headphones. A little weird, but well, let's press on because I wanted to get the video at least done for the week too. So you can find a brief overview of the whole research project in the introductory video on the channel if you haven't watched that already. But this week, so I don't have readings I'm going to share this week. It's been a bit of a topsy-turvy all over week. But something I've been thinking about a lot, prompted by readings, is about the narratives within making cultures. So narratives is like, what are the kind of stories or the themes or the way people talk and represent themselves and their making practices and their relations, either to making or with the things they make or with others in the making spaces. So a lot about identity, values, all kinds of things kind of are represented in these narratives. And there's two that particularly sort of that I'm thinking about a bit. Oh, I should first say, like, where do I experience these? So for me, I see them online, in different online making places, so like Instagram and Facebook, YouTube, podcasts that I listen to. Also in the knitting groups that I attend in person, so the kinds of things people talk about and the ways that shows different ideas that are more valued than others, attitudes that are more kind of criticised or judged. And these are all just really interesting things to notice, and to notice how they've changed across time in the culture, and then also to notice what are those stories doing. So what are they doing for the individual? Like, who do you become by telling a particular story about yourself and your making practice? Who do you not become? Who do you sort of say, well, that's not me, I'm not like that? How does that impact on the social connections about who can come to these spaces and who can't, because of what's the stories and the attitudes and the values that are more prized and the ones that aren't. So two that are really I'm thinking about a bit is the narrative of productivity and the narrative of mindfulness. So the productivity one, these days, I think it gets poo-pooed quite a bit. Like, it's seen as, if you're like, I'm going to knit as much as I can this month or this year, I'm aiming to knit 20 sweaters in the year, right? It's like, some people are going to kind of cheer that on, but other people are kind of be like going, that's not what it's about. It's about, mindfulness and connection to the process and da-da-da-da-da, right? So I tend to, and I don't see as much that kind of productivity narrative being told. Maybe it is, I'm just in a different bubble. So but that's okay, right? I'm not saying that's how it is, but that's the bubble that I'm in, where I see productivity as not getting, let's say, valorized or like valued. It doesn't get the social status or credit in the same way, right? And what I just find really funny about that, though, is it's like, it's only been pretty recently that knitting is like an option and a hobby. For most of the hundreds, thousands of years that knitting has been around, it's been a necessity. Like, people have had to make things, and that's why they were good at knitting while walking, and they would always have knitting on them. It's like any spare time where their hands weren't occupied doing something else, they would be knitting, right? Like, the productivity, the output of, like, I need to knit lots of socks, I need to darn lots of socks, I have to knit lots of sweaters, I have to knit, blankets or whatever it is, right? Or I have to spin, because the people were also having to spin the wool. I have to spin this to weave a blanket or to, like, it was this core necessity. You couldn't just go buy fabric or ready-made garments somewhere else. You had to make them. And so productivity was like, I'm just imagining this, I don't know, right? I wasn't around. But that it wasn't a leisure activity so much. It was like, it was really, really needed. And so now that we don't technically need it, most people in this world can go and get a ready-made garment um, there's different kind of narratives around why we would do it. And it makes me think this thing I read ages ago. It's called hedonic technologies, right? So knitting is now a hedonic technology. You're welcome. Which is more just like doing things that are productive, but they're not efficient, right? Like they're more expensive, they're more time consuming than just going and buying the thing. So it's like this, you do it for pleasure. But it's a technology, like knitting is a technology, it's a craft, it's a making practice, but we don't have to do it. So it's now a hedonic technology. I love that. There's something else I was going to say about this. Personally, I like the productivity thing. Not only, but I love the idea. I remember at the end of last year, and lots of knitters do this. I see this online. Is I just kind of made a video of like, here's all the things that I made this year, and actually getting them together. I was like, oh, that's cool. Partly because myself and many other knitters probably have a bit of a critical narrative internally that I don't make enough, I'm not productive enough, and I would just say that's going to be a generic criticism across people's whole lives, not just across their making lives, is somehow being inadequate, across many spheres of life. So that's something to work on in a different way. But I definitely there was some kind of inner satisfaction of going, oh, I actually finished a lot of things off this year. That was really cool. I didn't see it as I was doing it. And so I think as a reflective thing, that's cool. And I also I've often been like I'm definitely pretty anti-productivity culture, actually, because I think it's super problematic, very neoliberal, very patriarchal, actually. But I'm not actually against feeling good about being productive. I think that's really, for me, I just think that's really kind of a natural human instinct and drive, that we would feel good about doing things. I think it's a big part of core self-esteem is the satisfaction we get from having worked hard on something and achieved something. It's like that's actually how we build proper self-confidence or self-worth, right? So I'm not against the kind of the buzz one gets from working hard at something. I think it's a really good reward system. I think the short-term reward systems from little dopamine hits from watching puppies sheep actually, on the internet, I don't think these are good reward systems. I still do it because they're so cute, but I don't think they're good reward systems if they're the only way we're training our brains. But anyway, so I quite like the productivity part of making things, and I also notice like this is it's a little embarrassing, but I'm going to tell it anyway because I'm sure it is not just me. I have seen this around, other people have disclosed this too, right? Is it will make me feel superior sometimes too, right? Like when I'm knitting on a long haul flight, I get to the end of that flight and I've made a sock, and I'm just looking around just like going, what did you make? Before I started knitting, I would watch 5 movies or something. My brain would be like totally wired and overstimulated, and my eye, like it would just be such of a mess of a state to get wherever I was going, and I'd achieved nothing. I couldn't tell you what movies I'd watched. And now that I'm like knitting, I'm like, what did I ever do on planes? What was I thinking? This would drive me bonkers to be here without a knitting project. And yeah, I just kind of feel like this. I did something productive with this time that I really enjoyed. I can't sit and work on a computer on a plane. I somehow don't, I can't do that kind of productivity. But yeah, so I don't know. There is a way, and sometimes it makes me feel a little bit better than others, which I don't love that. But maybe if I sat with it more in the moment and let that kind of experience go a bit deeper, I might just feel a little bit proud of myself and go, I like myself actually. I like that I knit, and that I do something which is, this is what my ancestors did, is if they had time where their hands were idle, they would knit. And yeah, so no. So mindfulness. Oh, I don't know where to start and where to stop on this one. I have a massive rant about mindfulness in me, which I think I should spare this channel. The concept of mindfulness, as I understand it, is it's learning how to be self-reflective, how to notice your own inner experience, developing an inner observer, right? So instead of just going, I'm sad, or not even instead of just being sad, noticing, oh, I'm feeling sad, or part of me is feeling sad, or I notice I have a bit of an inner conflict. Part of me wants to do this, and another part wants to do that. So the capacity to self-reflect, to meta-communicate, to sort of notice one's inner world. That's how I kind of understand mindfulness, right? And so I'm totally for this. I think that's really great. It's my bread and butter work, actually, is supporting people to develop this. I have had to spend a lot of time developing it myself. Total fan. What I'm not a fan of is the way it's been co-opted and commercialized in Western culture and capitalism, and also used to prop up extractive and exploitative employment practice too, right? Like people in really high stress exploitative workplaces being given colouring in books as some kind of care gesture from a company that would make me want to burn the place down. So I think there's ways in which, and capitalism or neoliberal capitalism kind of thing. I know we're kind of post-capitalism, whatever this means, but I still think these values of neoliberalism are still very present in employment practices in many workplaces. That neoliberalism will take anything and turn it to its purposes. And so I think that's happened a lot with mindfulness. And a lot of people with really great intentions of really wanting to support people to be more mindful have kind of had to go along with that co-opting, because it's the only way to get it out there, kind of thing. And I think there's obviously been other options for some people. There's some really good programs and practices around it. There's just a way sometimes you see Western culture kind of grab something and like an amoeba, right? Like just take it into itself and turn it into something. Often maybe really dumbing it down or simplifying it. So I think that's just partly where I just go, yeah, mindfulness. But the thing itself, I love it. Is knitting teaching you mindfulness? This is a really interesting question to me. I would love your thoughts on this. Do you think knitting has made you more mindful? So more aware of your inner world, more able to self-reflect, more self-aware, basically. Now, I think it doesn't directly teach this. I think, I know we see it in research that knitting changes your brain waves depending on the kind of pattern you're knitting. I think some of them, I don't know what's in the research about this, like what kind of patterns people were knitting in the research when they were hooked up to these machines. I don't know that they were knitting complex cable patterns and stuff. I think they might have just been like knit in the round. Maybe, I don't know. Because I definitely think there's some knitting patterns that the pattern matters. So, but let's say I'm knitting something I don't have to pay a huge amount of attention to a pattern to. Like, definitely our brainwaves change to look more like meditation. Meditation can develop mindfulness, but not necessarily. Depends on the person, depends on the kind of meditation. Same with knitting, I think. So knitting can still like alter your brainwaves to be kind of restorative, but it doesn't necessarily develop more mindfulness. But it could. So I think, that comes back to my question, does it for you, right? Definitely slows down. I think for me, it develops, I'm not sure if I shared it last time. I think I shared it in a different video I was doing for work. This concept of soft fascination, which is, I've always called it unintentional thinking, which is when I'm doing some kind of activity. The shower is like the number one place for many people where this happens, right? Where I'm not focused, I don't have a task to focus on in terms of my cognitive processes. I don't have a task to think about. And so my mind wanders and does its own thing in a sense, and it kind of processes things, it puts things together. I have lots of my aha moments, certainly academically as well. It's like concepts will just kind of find themselves in some kind of cool new way. that this is called in some literature soft fascination. And I think knitting certainly does that for me. It'll put me into a state of soft fascination where I'm just unintentionally thinking it's just kind of happening. I'm not directing it in any particular place. And I think that's very, very valuable. I don't think in those moments that I'm really developing more mindfulness though. I actually think real mindfulness is developed very intentionally, and there are tools and practices for it. So I think a lot of the time when people are talking about being mindful in their knitting, they are talking about, I want this activity to help me relax. So I need to do it in a way that is not so oriented on getting it finished, but is oriented on enjoying the process of it. And then we would say, so it's more process oriented, process focused than it is mindful necessarily, or developing mindfulness, right? Not a bad thing. I think it's really great to slow down and to be like enjoying the process. It's not something I find so as easy. Like sometimes I'll really get caught up in, gee, I wish this was finished. This is taking forever. Different stages of a project, especially sweaters. I think many people experience that. So, but that was a big rant about what I think mindfulness is and is knitting doing it, and what do you think? Put it in the comments. The narrative, though, is that, or that I see in my little bubble in kind of the knitting world, is that mindfulness is better. Having a mindful orientation, taking your time, really enjoying the moment, is preferable to thinking, gee, I really want to pump this project out. And I really love getting it done. I love getting it finished. I love, I want to make 40 pairs of socks this year and 10 sweaters, and I'm going to really just go for it. Not as popular. Not as seen as maybe as enlightened or as advanced or as something sophisticated, or somehow seen as less than. And I think that's just a really interesting thing to notice and think about. What does that say about how culture has changed, where we're at the moment? And also, because as I was saying, mindfulness and stress management and well-being would not have been a primary motivation for knitting for most of knitting's history. Side effect, possibly, because it still would have changed people's brainwaves, but maybe in different ways. It's hard to say, right? Because I guess our brain activity is always culturally contextualized and technology contextualized as well, dependent or changed. Who knows what happened to people's brainwaves 500 years ago when they were knitting? I don't know. That's an interesting question that I can't see how we would answer. So off track. So what does it say about the culture and how things have changed? And then what does it do? That's the interesting thing for me, is what does this do? Like, let's say we're at a knitting group and I'm there just going, hey everyone, check this out. This is my 40th pair of socks this year. I'm so stoked. I have just churned through these babies. It's been I've just been like a machine. It's been awesome. I feel great. And you have people sitting there, and some people are going to be polite, right? Or some people are going to love it. Some people are going to be kind of polite to say, oh wow, yes, that's great. And others are going to maybe be a little silent. Somebody maybe is going to say, wow, well, I really prefer to just really be in the process and really enjoy the making. I've been really enjoying this sweater for the past 6 months that it's so fantastic just to really be with every single stitch and be with my hands and my body as I do it. And that's how I like to do it. So what happens in a social space when these two different narratives are kind of put up against each other potentially? How does that affect how people feel they can express themselves, how they might belong or not belong, what is or isn't okay there, who gets silenced by certain narratives? Because it's not just the narrative too, right? It's who's delivering it, what kind of social privileges and rank have they got in the group, right? There's some groups where people who've been there longer, maybe people who are a bit older, people who are white, people who are thin and attractive. They're all going to have other characteristics that give them more privilege and rank in the space or power. So whatever narrative they're expressing is going to shape the culture of that group, like the culture, like how we do things around here, what we believe in, what we value. So I don't know, I think that's really interesting, and I hope this doesn't wreck any knitting groups, right, where people listen to this and go, oh, I'm going to go watch my knitting group. Maybe that's okay too, right? Getting more explicit about some of these things doesn't necessarily, it ruffles feathers sometimes, but it can actually deepen our social connection. I think the other thing I think about the mindfulness narrative too, in terms of what is it saying, is it does reflect cultural change, but it also reflects privilege, I think too, right? That we would have spare time to make things that we don't actually need to make, that we have the money to buy materials to make sweaters that cost us more than going and buying a ready-made sweater, or pair of socks or whatever it is, right? It's like it usually costs you more unless you're buying wool secondhand at the op shop, or you're unraveling sweaters, secondhand, already made sweaters from the op shop or something. But even the luxury of the time to do it. And so if you also have the further luxury to like take as much time as you want, you don't have to finish it. There's like another kind of privilege there, which is, just I think an interesting thing to notice. I certainly feel really lucky. I don't always remember this, but I do feel really lucky to be able to buy nice yarn and to have time to knit. I must say I don't have as much time or money for either of those now that I've started studying in a PhD, but I'm not complaining about that because that's also a huge privilege. So I feel very lucky about that. This video has been so much waffling. I've got to try and stay on track for next week a bit better. What have I been making this week? I have been making a repetitive strain injury down through my thumb joint. Can't see it, of course, because you can't see these things. But I'm going to tell you the story so that maybe it saves you as well. So I did a big spinning marathon. Today's Sunday. I did a big spinning marathon last Sunday. I reckon it was easy 5 hours. And then I spun a bit more on the Monday night and the Tuesday night. And then I drove for 8 hours on the Thursday. And then on the Friday morning, the inflammation came up. So, but it did start at the spinning thing. It didn't get painful though until the Friday morning, so I didn't notice, except all the signals were there that it was coming. So anytime we get an injury like a repetitive strain injury, before we start feeling any inflammation or pain, there are signals. And lots of my work is about being, my paid work outside of PhD is being very focused on very early subtle signals of change, right? And so I know all this, and I've been doing it for 20 odd years, and I still missed it in myself, right? So at the end of that 5 hours, I noticed like a tiny little sort of twinge, just something caught my attention in there, and I thought, oh, now's the moment to stop. Part of me went, oh, but it's not bedtime yet, I could keep going. But I was like, no, I'm going to stop, because this means that I could hurt myself if I keep going. So I did stop. I think that was great. But I was wrong. If you already felt a twinge, the damage is already done, right? Here's when I think back to where did I pick up the signal earlier than that? It was times when I was going, gee, I think what's it called when you're drafting? I think I draft a little bit like I'm holding it too tight. I should loosen my grip. This won't be good for my thumb over time. The issue was already happening. If I was thinking that, it was already not good for my thumb. The other thing that I was doing is I was trying to draft in different ways. I'm just going, I wonder if I should just mix this up and try different drafting techniques so it's not such a strain on my hand, my thumb. This was also like actually a really clear signal that it must have already been a strain. When we start thinking about this might be a problem for me in the future, it's a problem now. So, but it's just at that really early point of becoming a problem where you don't actually have sensory feedback from your body yet that it's a problem. So anyway, I'd like to think that this was a great learning for me. I'm just not sure that I will, because I've been in this kind of game for such a long time and I know better, but I still keep missing those signals. I'm not sure, but maybe also because I've talked about it, it will help me learn it a bit more. But anyway, so I've been icing it multiple times a day, and just really resting it up. So I'm not even knitting. I did knit the other day with it a bit sore and changed my knitting style. And it was fine, I think. But I've noticed I was teaching all day yesterday, so not really needing to use my thumb at all, and it was really good. So same again today, and so I think I'm just going to like really rest it a lot, and that's great because I've only got one knitting project here and I've got no spinning projects here, so I'm just going to rest it heaps, and keep icing it a few times a day. It's already feeling a lot better. So anyway, that's what I made this week. I have almost finished that sweater spin, the Corriedale sweater spin, so I've got about 6 roll lags left. So when I get back to Canberra, I will finish those off, assuming my thumb is all good again, and then I can wash it and calculate my meterage and then work out what I can make with it. So that's super exciting. I will be able to start showing you progress on a sweater. Yeah, that's me for the week. I hope you're also having excellent times making things and not having any injuries or strains with that. Or if you are, you're kind of finding the willpower to do what you need to do to take care of it so you can knit forever or make whatever it is you're making. Yeah, I'll see you next week. Bye.